Good evening. Hi. And welcome to our Distinguished Speaker Series. I'm Sandy Edwards, and I have the good fortune of serving as the museum's Deputy Director. We have really been looking forward to this evening together, and I must say you all are looking especially fashionable this evening. Perhaps you are inspired by our speakers, or maybe our speakers will be inspired by you. What an exciting opportunity for our community to host internationally acclaimed artists and innovators as part of the Distinguished Speakers Series. This year's lineup offers a wide array of perspectives from our most recent speaker, artist Marina Abramovich, to tonight's talk with Lisa Perry and Yvonne Force Villareal, inspired initially by our pop art exhibition. We continued the series throughout the year featuring the Chef's Table creators David Gelb and Brian McGinn, jazz superstar Jason Moran, and artists in our permanent collection Linda Banglis and Carrie Mae Weems. You're not going to miss a one. Before we begin the introduction, I'd like to request that you silence your cell phones. And following the lecture, we will host an artist signing that features design works for sale through our museum store. They're wonderful items that I encourage you all to see. I'd like to take a moment and express appreciation to those who helped make this series possible. Thank you to our colleagues, Sarah Siegerlin, Public Programs Manager, who has been instrumental in advancing this series. Sarah, could you stand so that we can thank you? There she is. Thank you, Sarah. And a very special thanks to our dedicated volunteers who welcomed you, took your tickets, for helping make our education programs possible. We simply cannot do these programs without them. Please let's show our appreciation to our volunteers. Thank you. And to many of you who are devoted members, supporting all of our programs with your presence, your enthusiasm, and your respect. We thank you so much. We are thrilled that Del Monte Foods is our exclusive sponsor of this Distinguished Speakers Series. Del Monte took our dream of an ambitious series and made it a reality. We want to thank Nick Jolly and all of the people of Del Monte Foods. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, Del Monte. At Crystal Bridges, we celebrate strong women who follow their muse, know their minds, and create adventurous pathways. Women who in their own way are disruptors of the norm, delighting in the new while honoring the past. Women who are open and receptive to new approaches and challenging ideas, who thrive within a changing world and are at their best living among a diverse and inclusive society. At Crystal Bridges, we give wall space, we give floor space, air space, lawn space, and now forest space to the evocative work and message of these women. Tonight, we happily give stage space to not one but two remarkable women who represent the qualities we value and celebrate. Both are individually doing significant and impressive work, but together, they will provide insight into their creative worlds and the things that inspire them. We have the privileged opportunity to listen in as they talk about their work and reveal a bit about what makes them tick, and tick so beautifully. Let's talk about their roots. Lisa was raised in Chicago and migrated to New York City. Yvonne describes her early life as nomadic, with formative years in Key West, Florida, then migrating to New York City. Their education. Lisa is a graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology with a focus on textile technology and color theory. Yvonne is a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design with a degree in fine arts. Their calling, Lisa, fashion world icon, whose trademarks are primary colors and pops of contrast, as well as references to artists. Yvonne, art world impresario, whose mission is to produce art on a grand scale. What's their momentum? Lisa evolved her line of women's wear into a comprehensive collection, The World of Lisa Perry, with a range of categories including women's wear, accessories, children's wear, and designs for the home. Yvonne produces ambitious public art projects, reaching new audiences and expanding awareness through contemporary art. And what are the key identifiers? Look on their website and social media. It is colorful. See their work. It is hopeful and with a sense of optimism. They are adventurous and they are bold. But the through line of each woman's approach to work is collaboration. So please welcome to our stage Lisa Perry and Yvonne Villareal.
Thank you very much. That was incredible. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, I'd love her to say all that all over again. That was incredible. Thank you so much, Sandy. That was an incredible introduction. Really appreciate that. And this place is gorgeous. I had no idea what I was coming to, Crystal Bridges, and we definitely did not make enough time to visit here, so we will definitely be back. Yes. Thank you so much.
So this is my second trip. I first came to Crystal Bridges 4 years ago when my husband Leo Villareal's Buckyball opened. Yes. Yeah. And Leo, me, our family, we are so incredibly honored to have that work here permanently in such a stellar and important collection. And I'm so happy to be seeing it glowing again this evening. And I was very excited to be invited to partake in a conversation this evening with my friend and style icon, Lisa Perry. I first met her 10 years ago. Actually, we were seated next to each other at the Met Ball. And a few months later, she invited me to her very first fashion presentation. And over this decade, I've got to see her vision unfold in a truly personal and unprecedented way. So, Lisa, let's begin our conversation.
Great.
And if you could talk a little bit about how your brand has evolved. And, well, I've watched it evolve, but what I really want to know is how did you get started in fashion? And tell us a little bit about the background.
Great. Well, first, I want to say, Yvonne, when I was asked to speak here and they said, we talked about who could possibly interview me, you were the first person I thought of. Your connection with Crystal Bridges, but also your warmth, your love. You are such an incredibly inspiring person, and I'm so thrilled that you said yes. And the bumps on the airplane today, it were a little bit heavy for me, and I just reached over and grabbed Yvonne's hand, and she said, in her calm way, "You're fine.
Yeah.
It's just clouds."
Yes, I said,
it's
I know.
Beautiful.
I know we'll be talking.
It's a beautiful experience. She said, "I know our speech is happening today." So I was like, okay, great. So I couldn't have picked a better interviewer. So Sandy told you a little bit about my background, that I grew up in Chicago. And what I'd like to add to that is that it was an incredibly creative home, a creative environment. My dad was a painter by hobby, but I think it really was his true passion. So we would catch him in the basement. Whenever Dad wasn't around, we'd find him in the basement, splattering on the floor, Jackson Pollock style. And the idea of entertainment in our home was to put together a 5,000-piece Jackson Pollock puzzle. Try that. autumn rhythm, puzzle. Like, okay, good. That never got finished. Anyway, in high school, Mom opened an art gallery. And so after school, we would spend time there, which was fantastic. And then to pay the bills, my father started a textile business. And so I was around a creative background, lifestyle for my whole upbringing. And I always had a love for fashion. I remember in high school, early collecting days of going to, very different than my collecting now, but going to the Salvation Army. And I always wanted to be a little bit different. I didn't want to wear what all the other girls in the school were wearing. I always wanted to stand out a bit. And so that was an early start to my collecting. And then I left Chicago to move to New York to go to FIT. My major was textile technology, thinking that I would move back to Chicago to join the family business. But as it happens to a lot of us, we moved to New York and we never leave. So I do go back home to visit, though.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're in New York, and quite a few people, our friends here, Crystal Bridges, have also been to New York and in Lisa's home. I don't think she was there, but Lisa and her husband, they're very generous and open their home for art tours, even when they're out of town. And one door that's also always open within her home is the door to her closet. Now, it's not an average closet, it is a small museum. It is, and it's filled with really
Some of the pieces are behind you.
unique and incredible vintage clothing collection. So what started this passion of vintage?
It came about in a bit of a unique way, and it wasn't a vintage at all. It was a visit to the Courrèges store in Paris. I don't know how many of you know the great designs of André Courrèges from the 60s. I went into this store, and I walked into this futuristic spaceship, and I felt like I was home. I said that something resonated with me, and I just loved it. I bought several pieces that trip, and I started wearing Courrèges, and a friend of mine who's a great collector said, if you love the new pieces of Courrèges, you have to see vintage. So I went to a great vintage store in California, and they introduced me to not only Courrèges, but Pierre Cardin, Rudy Gernreich, Pucci, early Saint Laurent, Trigère, all of the great, beautiful designs, all focused in the 60s. And from that moment, it was this epiphany I had. I only wore vintage clothing for 10 years. It was all I wore. Wow. I'm not saying my jeans and t-shirts were vintage, but anytime I was going anywhere, I was in vintage. And I think that it was that immersion into the vintage that really, kind of struck a chord with me and my friends.
Wow. While you were putting together your vintage collection, you also started collecting pop art from the 60s, from the same genre?
I did. So I was so immersed in the fashion. I said, there's a picture of my living room. I said, there are a few images of the pop art collection that will come up. I said that if the clothing is this phenomenal, let me see we had bought a new apartment, was the impetus for it. And it was that apartment that you saw. And so I said, if the clothing is that fantastic, the art, the furniture, the design, I'm sure that there are a lot of incredible things, very innovative things going on in the 60s. And I think that is what started it. It's because we had this new apartment to fill with art. My husband and I said, let's look and see what is going on in art in the 60s. And believe it or not, we put together, I'd say 90% of the collection we have today in 1 year. It's very, very unique. And we literally, while the construction was going on, we would pore over books. We would have pop art books, just tons of books, and we would put sticky notes on pieces that we wanted. And we had some art advisors, and we would say, can you find us this? Can you find us this? And we were putting together, not only, this is a great picture to talk about because, I mean, it is a giant boob, but not only because it's a giant boob do I want to talk about it, but so you see in this picture that the picture with the salt shaker is Tom Wesselman. There's a Lichtenstein on the left, and then the breast is by a French artist, César. So our collection, which is unique, is not only American pop, but European pop. And it has been a really wonderful experience to dig in, to see not only what are they doing in America in the 60s, but also in Europe. And I think that's the fun layer to our collection.
Yes, definitely. And when you say, and you bought a new apartment and you were doing construction, I do want to add to that and say that there were 2 ballrooms in this apartment. So it was actually a very old apartment, historic, background to this place. And what Lisa's vision was something of the 21st century she wanted, something that could really house the art and her clothing collection. So she made a bold move in getting rid of 2 ballrooms. I mean,
it's very true, and I think that there was so much construction going on for so long that I decided to have an opening party, and I called it 2001. It was 2001 when we moved in. I called it 2001 Our Space Odyssey, and I decided to be friendly to invite everybody from the building. Well, the average age of the building, and I love elderly people, but was like 85. And I had to have a doctor and an ambulance on hold downstairs because I knew that when they saw this, there could definitely be a couple heart arrests going on. So it was so different. You walk into this apartment building that was built at the turn of the century, and then you enter the top penthouse, and it is as futuristic a world as you can imagine, as you could tell by that living room picture. And so it was really an incredible experience to transform this very, very old world space into our pop art penthouse, but fun. This picture is outside on the terrace, so there's wraparound terraces in the apartment. And so in addition to the 60s works by the great masters, we decided to introduce also work by current day artists, such as Jeff Koons and Murakami and Damien Hirst, who are inspired by pop. So we thought that that was an interesting element as well.
yes, definitely, it is. So from this really almost obsessive decade of wearing vintage clothing, it's really incredible that you were so strict about that, or passionate, I should say. So what was the transition? What was the deciding moment that you said, I want to start wearing my own clothes? When did you start your line, Lisa Perry?
Right, so this happened, so during the 10 years that I wore vintage, people would always say to me, who's that designer? What is that? That's so cool. Where can I buy that? And sadly, I couldn't send them anywhere because, they were really one of a kind. So I had the idea mostly to create these clothes for my friends so they wouldn't hate me, because I never had a good answer for them. So I thought, you know what, that so many people love this look of these clean lines, these A-line dresses. I said, there must be something that I can do with this. So going back to my FIT days, which I really didn't do anything much with that degree that I had, because there's a whole span of time that I had baby twins that I was taking care of. So that was my full-time job, and I decided that it would be a perfect time when my kids were, out of the house, and perfect time to start my own collection and to see where that could go. But I originally wanted to do it strictly for my friends, have a little atelier in my house. I thought that that would be very fun and cool, and everything would be custom made. And then my friend, I don't know how many of you know the great retailer Jeffrey, who has stores in New York and Atlanta, and I invited him over to see my collection, and he said, I want to buy that for my store. And I said, no, I'm only selling that to my friends. He said, I'm your friend. And I said, but you can't wear these clothes. And he said, we won't get into that. Anyway, so Jeffrey said, I'll make your life a pleasure. We'll start out very slow and exclusively, and a brand was born.
Well, I'm really grateful to Jeffrey, and I love wearing your clothes. I wear them a lot. And what I love so much is that you're taking this, so much from the past and your love of the 60s design, but you're making, it was a futuristic time. It was about creating these clothes for the future. Well, we are now the future. We are that future. And you've taken it into a very modern 21st century look, but also comfort. So they look so striking and fashionable, and very often fashion isn't that comfortable. And I love the just how you feel in them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. It was definitely a goal of mine. And, as Sandy mentioned, that this museum is so much about celebrating women and women empowerment, which Yvonne and I both really appreciate. That was a very important piece to me creating this brand, because I like to eat. I love sweets. I like to, feel very comfortable in my clothes. I don't want to have to always hold in my stomach and worry about what it looks like. So what's a more perfect shape than A-line? And as you see up there, at that top, you can, thank you. Yes, eating and breathing, yes. So you see, even this top on the right, I carry it to an extreme sometimes, but it's, in the gown on the left, the gown Yvonne has on, the dress I have on, we're very comfortable. We have pockets. It's about women, just feeling great in their clothes, like you said, so it's great.
But also very powerful and very yes, I am the woman of the future that was imagined.
It's so true.
I love that.
And I don't know if you noticed, but you cannot be a wallflower in that. You don't want to hide, melt into the background in that.
So just within a few years of starting your line, you immediately started to merge your love of art and fashion. And it came very naturally to you. And you started to collaborate with some of the artists that were in your collection. And you created really amazing partnerships through these collaborations. Could you tell us a little bit about
Of course.
them? Yeah.
Of course. I'm so happy to talk about this particular part of the business, because I think that it was something that felt very right, very unique. It was a unique approach, but it was so part of my DNA. And I think that that is so important when building a brand, because what people would always say to me, Lisa, we just think that your brand it's so focused. We know when somebody's walking down the street and it's a Lisa Perry, and that was so important to me. So this added layer of the artist collaborations was so important to me. And, I have a little motto, and it's, when I look at a painting, I see a dress. And some people may think that that's a little bit strange, and maybe you just appreciate the art for the art, but I always take it a little step further, because I look at, whether it's a pop art painting or a minimalist painting that I also love, I immediately envision how can that be wearable? And so that was something that I thought was very cool and I wanted to explore. So you see the slide up top, that was my first collaboration, and that was with the great images of Andy Warhol photographs. And a friend of mine was doing a show with these Warhol photographs, and of course, as I'm walking around and looking at hundreds of photos, I'm thinking, which one of those would look great on a dress? And he said, "You're weird." And I said, no, I could really see this. And he said, "Great, let's kind of let's go down this path." So when you do artist collaborations, there's a lot of, it's not just like you call up and you say, "I want to use that image." There are a lot of things involved in getting rights. It was very important to me. I didn't want to just, use these images without getting the artist or the foundation's permission. That was a very important piece, because I think a lot of people do that.
Yes.
And so I think that this was very fun. I actually was able to reach out to the photographer on the right. That was an image that was on the cover of an Esquire magazine from the 60s. And I was able to reach out to that photographer, Carl Fisher. And so that was exciting. The two on the left are photographer Nat Finkelstein, and he had passed away, but I was dealing with his wife at the time. So we were able to get permission for those. And then the next collaboration was with the Roy Lichtenstein Foundation. I'm pictured there with Dorothy Lichtenstein, who Yvonne and I both know, and she's a lovely, lovely woman, and who really controls the Lichtenstein estate so beautifully. And when I reached out to her, you see the painting behind that was in my living room. I'm not going to lie. I think it helps that I'm a collector of that gigantic painting. So when I called Dorothy, it wasn't like it was, out of the blue. She was very happy to help. And so we were able to go through the images, and you see the three dresses here are three examples of Lichtenstein collaboration dresses, which I think came out very fun, happy dresses that people love to wear. At the time, the one thing I have to say is that they're very, very limited. So I mean, the Warhol dresses, we only made 10 of each. I mean, tiny, tiny numbers. And the Lichtenstein dresses, I think that, we did a few more, but not a lot. And I think that the people who buy these dresses, they really appreciate that. They want it to be unique. They don't want to see themselves coming and going, just like I didn't when I was wearing vintage. And so I think that that's one thing that, is nice about the collaborations, that, you keep them small. The next collaboration was with the great artist Jeff Koons, and I thought that wouldn't it be nice to work with a living artist, somebody that I could actually talk to. And Jeff is one of the sweetest, most generous people. Yvonne and I both know Jeff, and when I called Jeff to say, would you be interested in doing a collaboration on some dresses, he said, that sounds great. And I said, well, can you let me know which images, which paintings you think I can use. And he said, no, you pick them. Just go to jeffkoons.com.
That sounds so Jeff Koons. That's amazing.
Okay. I said, Jeff, but there's just hundreds of things to pick from. And he said, have fun. So with my assistant designer, we sifted through hundreds of different images and came up with different ideas. That's a leather jacket we did. There's, a cute dress. So I think that collaboration was a lot of fun. And, these dresses, I'm very proud of them also because a lot of people have told me that they have framed their dresses, and that becomes art in their home. And I think that, you know, not everybody can afford a Jeff Koons painting, and so whatever kind of, you know, it becomes affordable art, which I love. And I've seen some of them in lucite frames, and it's really cool.
Definitely.
The next collaboration was with Robert and Deanna. And I was very excited to work with Robert and Deanna because there was a retrospective of his going on. My store was right across the street from the Whitney Museum at the time. And I thought that, wouldn't this be great? I'll collaborate with Robert and Deanna, and then when he goes to his opening at the Whitney, he'll walk across the street to my store. No. Robert and Deanna lives on an island off of Maine. Very reclusive individual. I not only did not meet Robert and Deanna, I barely spoke to Robert and Deanna for our collaboration, but rumor has it that he did walk by the store and gave, and he, you know, maybe went like this and was like, all right. So I think that he got a little something out of him, but I really was insistent because I said I want to work with a living artist, and I really wanted to speak to him. And so I kept calling this number. I had his phone number, and one day, sure enough, he picked up the phone. And I said, hi, Robert, it's Lisa Perry. We did that great collaboration. You came to see the you know, sweaters and the dresses in my store. And he said, we didn't collaborate. And I said, oh, well, you gave permission. He said, I gave permission, but I wouldn't call it collaborating. And I was like, okay, whatever you say. I love your art. I'm a big fan. Everybody loves the clothes, and they'll live on in a very positive, happy way. You know me and my like happy self. And he was just, he was like, okay, bye. But I felt great satisfaction. I spoke to Robert and Deanna, and I think he gave me his blessing, or at least I took it that way. Anyway, a couple more. We used the love stamp, the famous love stamp image. I think you have a love sculpture in the museum here, so that's a beautiful, iconic image that we were able to work on. My next collab is with the great Leo Villareal. We have a little prop here. So this is something I'm very, very proud of. Leo and I, from the first phone call to Karlie Kloss walking at the Met Ball with it, was a 2-year collaboration. This is it's small, but as Yvonne knows better than anybody, the work is very, very involved. Each one of these, this bag is actually, has a little baby computer in it. And it's very, very intricate work. It's a pattern that really doesn't ever repeat. It gets very quiet and very loud, and it's really mesmerizing. Leo came up with the brilliant name Scintillator. And when he told me, I was like, that is so perfect. Yeah. It is scintillating, and I'm just really proud of this little piece of art. Yeah. And we have the sculpture in our home, and so similar to walking by a painting and seeing a dress, I would walk by that sculpture and I'd say, that would make an incredible evening bag.
Yes. Well, it's even more than a sculpture. Lisa actually commissioned Leo to create a site-specific sculpture in her powder room. The powder room does not pale when it's next to the closet. I mean, the powder room is the most beautiful powder room ever. You walk in and you're completely surrounded by the digital walls of white light, and then there is a mirror, and it's a Jeff Koons mirror, and then right behind kind of the toilet is a Mel Ramos painting. Yes. Sexy, beautiful woman. Yes. I mean, that is a dream come true, that bathroom. So you saw this in that.
I did.
Yes.
I did. And I find that bathroom is so dreamy that people spend a little bit too much time in there. Small problem. I'm like,
Yeah, you have to, first you walk by the breast to get to the bathroom.
that's right. It's a sexy kind of experience.
But Leo was really interested in making this because he loves wearables. He goes to Burning Man, he makes blinkies, like wearable small pendant pieces. So just like the buckyball, he feels like this will bring people to it. So it's like a digital campfire, or something that people are attracted to. And he loved the idea of having small sculptures like in a cocktail party or at a restaurant, that would just be kind of freestanding. And I hear there might be another one. Yes? We'll
So
let you
again,
know.
with our limited editions, they sold out
Yes,
so
immediately.
fast. And so maybe a second edition in the works.
Okay, I hope so. Yes.
Is that are people being like hypnotized? Don't fall asleep.
Okay. So let's see
Yes,
where
so,
we're
right. This is a good time to, since we talked about all of these artist collaborations, Yvonne also does incredible collaborations, and I'd love you to talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
we'll
those.
take a little break and I'll talk for a few minutes in depth here. Okay, so as Sandy said, we, at our production fund, we produce ambitious public sculpture and all types of art, really. And in order to make these sculptures and public art happen, we have to, of course, fundraise. And so we wanted to be creative about some aspect of our fundraising. And we decided, let's take this really long tradition of artists making functional objects, which really was more of just a small practice that an artist would do in their studio. Like, Merritt Oppenheim made a table. Rauschenberg made tables. They're usually unique pieces that the artists would make. And so what about this idea of inviting an artist to make towels? So we started making towels in our production fund, sold them for always $100, under $100. And like Lisa's dresses, I walked into like the place I get my manicure done in New York, and I went to the bathroom and they had a Nara towel hanging on the wall. And we love this idea of these huge, beautiful towels, which become canvases, and make this art more accessible. And just like public art does, or make art more accessible through it being on the clothing itself, and more just available to view and think of in a different way. So while we've been doing the towels, we were invited by Barneys to consider doing a collaboration with them, and we went to Dorothy Lichtenstein, and we don't have any of her painting, and she said yes to us, so we were thrilled and so generous, and they didn't even want any of the proceeds. It was all to our production fund to help us with our public art mission. So we re-editioned some of the early things that he had made. He was one of the artists who did really love to make functional objects. So we made this China set exactly the way he had made it, but made it available again. And it was really the price of China. It was very affordable. Okay, next image. And this great tote bag that we have some available this evening, and some big oversized pillows. And Dorothy chose the images. If they weren't reissued functional objects, she would pick the right image for the form. And Jeff Koons came, and he bought a ton of products. And we've also worked with him in the past. We've done a towel with him and some plates. And then that was such a successful partnership with Barneys that we went on to do another line with Alex Katz. And Alex Katz did all black and white ink drawings that were then put onto products. He wanted to make it very special, almost feel like a handmade pieces. And there we all are at the opening. So just two examples of some of the public art that this has helped to fund. It didn't fund it entirely, but helped certainly. This is one of our more well-known pieces. It is a permanent public artwork, which doesn't happen a lot. And it's called Prada Marfa by the amazing artist duo Elm Green and Dragset. And it's right outside of Marfa, Texas, and I hope you can all take a pilgrimage to see that one day. And then a piece that we've just presented this year, it'll be up for another year, is called Seven Magic Mountains by the really genius artist Ugo Radonone. This took 5 years to make. And I love this image. Really, if you were standing there, you'd be probably shorter than the lowest boulder. I consider it the 21st century Stonehenge. And it's all about tensions, what's artificial, what's natural, and it's right outside of Las Vegas. So I love this also for the pop colors that, you know, I should have worn this dress to the opening. I didn't, but it was really hot that day, and there were a lot of thorns, so, you know, it wouldn't have worked. But so that just gives you an example of how we've also worked with functional collaborations and with artists, and it's been really an incredible process along the way. But now I want to get back to...
Wait, but I really think that everybody here, how far is Vegas from here? I mean, wait a minute. You could drive there, right? You could... Direct flight. I think you should do field trip. Go see seven Magic Mountains. It is spectacular. You can't. I think that everybody needs to go see that. I do. I do.
Well, I agree. Absolutely. So what I'm really astounded by is that you've managed to create such a very unique niche in the world of fashion that meets art, made it so much your own. And I want to know what your vision is now for your brand to evolve.
So currently, I'm very lucky to have transitioned from having my own stores and paying lots of rent on Madison Avenue to having an exclusive arrangement with Barneys. And Barneys has about a dozen stores in major cities, and so now my collection is exclusively at 12 Barneys stores, and I pay no rent.
Yay.
Okay, that's a major bonus. And I think that the reason I signed on to this partnership is, you know, I didn't start my brand when I was 20. So I think that when you start a brand a little later in life, and I'm thrilled that I did, there's still lots that I want to do to explore different avenues. But so within Barneys, they have the infrastructure to allow me to go into different product categories. And you see pictures here of the home collection that I do within Barneys. There were, last summer for 3 months, there was a pop-up shop that was all Lisa Perry and Barneys product. And so it was a very, very fun, happy environment. These are my placemats, which I should have started my business, and I should have really done placemats.com, because I sold way more placemats than dresses, and it's just been an unbelievable product category for me, and it just immediately makes the house happy. It's very affordable, and so that was a great thing that we did. And then I think there's a picture of the other category that I think is, you know, absolutely adorable, and so my happy, fun look translates so beautifully to a little girl's line. In fact, people said that I make they're grown-up dresses, but they really should be little girls' dresses. So I didn't know if I should take that as a compliment, or I wasn't sure what they were actually saying. But I think that it's today in this environment that, you know, there's so much turmoil, angst, lots of stuff going on. I think that as much happiness as we can spread through fashion and art and these collaborations. It makes us feel great, you know, every day to go to work, and I think that it is just a great place, a great space to be in.
Yeah, yeah, it really has been a calling for you. You know, it's come so such a deep passion from within that you've managed to bring out. It's inspirational to me, certainly.
Thank you.
It's like you've fused together multidisciplinary practices, really, and just speaking creatively. You know, I want to know how you are going to fuel yourself to keep going into this next decade, let's say.
Right, I think that since I feel very, you know, in a great place with my collection at Barneys and working on these different product categories, I think that at this point I'm thinking of exploring ways to create my own art. I started, before I had my brand, I you know, was a painter a bit. Did a little bit of painting, a little bit of drawing. I'd like to, I think, dig deeper and see where that takes me. And you know, maybe one day I'll have a piece at Crystal Bridges.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I can't wait to see that. That's really great. Well, obviously, I could talk to Lisa all night about art and fashion and life, and I don't want to be selfish, though, so I would like to open up any questions that you all might have to have a dialogue together.
We'd like them to use the mic.
Okay.
Okay.
Raise your hand.
Thanks, ladies. It's so interesting to talk about the intersection of fashion and art, but of course it all ends up at retail. So I wanted to know either one of your thoughts, or Lisa in particular, about the state of retail. You know, there's all these great specialty retailers and all around the globe, but there's a big shakedown happening. You know, Macy's is struggling. A lot of these other retailers are in private equity hands, et cetera. So what do you think about the retail equation and where that's going in relation to fashion? And Yvonne, I wanted to ask you, are you and Leo going to Burning Man again this year? And what are your recommendations for a first-timer?
Okay.
Oh, that's funny. So I'll take the retail question, and you're right. Lots of things going on in retail, and I think that the most important thing is to stay unique. I think that Barneys, and you know, I know Barneys best. And that is that fact that they have these exclusive relationships. And I think that that is what you'll see more retailers, especially the bigger stores, having to do. Because that will be a reason for you to go to Barneys. You can only get Lisa Perry at Barneys. And now I know you're all going to run there. And you know, I think that if you see the same thing at so many different stores, it's not as interesting. So I think that that's, you know, one way to keep things interesting, and I think that, you know, they happen to do a great job with it. And these artist collaborations that Barneys, you know, is willing to work on.
Yeah. So yes, we're going to go to Burning Man. And Leo's been going to Burning Man for 23 years. I am only 9 years in. I love it. It's really, it's changed my life in a very positive way.
Does everyone know what Burning Man is? No,
okay.
not everyone.
It's a festival out in the Black Rock Desert, which is the closest city to it is Reno. And so it started off with about 400 people. It started off with a campfire in San Francisco, a bonfire really, that got bigger and bigger, and then started with about 400 people out in the desert, and then now it's about 70,000. It's capped. They can't have any more. It's also Bureau of Land Management land. So in any case, that's all tedious information, but it's fascinating. And one thing that in my 9 years, the last 2 years, which I actually haven't told you, I've been designing my own clothes because I can't buy things that I that that fit my vision of myself anymore. I can buy things and modify them, but I've also been making them. So they're all really handmade clothes, fur pieces, fake fur, a lot of fake fur. Yes.
Collaboration.
Yeah. we will talk. So and now I'm starting to do it more and more in my own life here. Lisa was just at our birthday party in Marfa, and so the dress that I had on was, I got the dress, but the boots I made, I spray painted them, I glued hot glue gun fur strip up them, things I never would have done before I went to Burning Man. So you modify things to make them your own. And my advice to a new burner would be read all the principles, read everything about Burning Man on their wonderful Burning Man website. The principles are very important, like no judgment and participation and things that really make that society so unique, and hopefully all those principles, bleed into this world as well. So I would say do that, and then go there thinking about being your fantasy version of yourself. Not a costume, you don't wear costumes, you wear what you really want to wear in here, but maybe don't have the nerve to. I'm not saying you don't have the nerve to, but maybe one doesn't have the nerve to.
Another question? You got it.
Thank you, ladies, for making fashion that's fun. It was really interesting to hear you talk. I noticed, though, before you came on stage, several photographs of Hillary Clinton in some of your designs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was hoping somebody would ask that question. I love talking about Hillary. Anyway, yes. So Hillary and I have had a friendship for, I worked on her first Senate campaign in '98. So we go way back, and I've just really come out of the dark days. I was very, very, very sad, needless to say. It was very difficult, very, very difficult time. Yvonne and I were together on election night, and so it was quite devastating for me. But so Hillary, as you see, so both Chicago girls, both love a good hot dog with everything. And Hillary is awesome. She is just one of the most down-to-earth, beautiful human beings, and unfortunately people don't get to know her that way. And as soon as I started my collection, she said, "I want to wear your clothes." And so I don't know if you saw in several of the pictures, they really suit her. They, she's so open to wearing color, and I think that there's that bit of sophistication in my clothes that, she really loved and welcomed, and so we just have a great friendship going back, and that's kind of how it came to be.
Another question?
What happened to the family textile business?
Good question. Another good question. So the family textile business was around for a long time. Since I was young. My sister became president of the textile company, and then my dad passed away, sadly. Mom was also working in the business. My brothers were in the business, but I think that after a certain amount of time, my sister, she actually decided to sell it. I wasn't working in the business, but sold it to a bigger company that, kind of took it in, and it lives on in a different way. So, but thank you for asking.
Thanks for coming to Arkansas. I have a thought. Body image you've hinted on, you like to eat, and the A line is fantastic for really all women. And so what I'm wondering is if you would talk a little bit about body image and what you're seeing in the fashion industry, but then also I'm pretty excited about the little you know, the child line. And I'm thinking, being the daughter of, or the mother of a daughter who struggled with her own body image, I think that, you know, pop art is kind of seeing a resurgence. And, you know, maybe you could think about an adolescent line bringing art to the masses, you know, to confidence in the body, the woman's body, in that space. But body image, if you'd talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think what's going on now in fashion is kind of the opposite of what I'm doing. So as you see where, you know, people, and nothing against them, I think they're brilliant business people, the Kardashians, and, you know, even Beyonce, Rihanna, if you noticed the last couple Met Balls, talking about the Met Ball, I literally think that half of the women there were half naked. I mean, it's unbelievable, the fashion now. I mean, it's either completely see-through or, you know, it's incredible. And I think that message to young girls is not a healthy one. I have real problem with it. I think that when I think about designing, a lot of women ask me to design for that tween age where the girls are really kind of struggling with finding clothes that fits and something that doesn't have, you know, studs and peace signs and skulls, and it's really it's a crazy time. Like, fashion for young girls it's difficult, and so I think that it will be a focus of mine to design some, you know, clothes that are, you know, is a bit sophisticated without being too sophisticated, but just these cute shapes in fun colors, very easy, you know, not so embellished. And I think that we could really have something here. And so we're starting, and we're designing away.
Amazing. That's great.
Maybe one more question.
For coming. I lived in New York a long time, and I remember when Calvin Klein was outed for going around in a dark limousine to see what people were wearing, so he could, when he got sort of blocked with something to design.
Oh, wow.
Can you talk about where you manufacture in your process? Do you design first? Do you draw? Do you work with fabric first, because you came from the textile background?
Yeah.
And I love what you put Hillary in.
Oh,
I was a
thank
great
you.
fan.
Thank you so much. So fabric is definitely a starting point for most designers, and for me especially. I wore this dress because this is a dress from my very first collection, to show the timeless classic nature of these designs and the quality of the fabric. So these are wool jersey. Yvonne is in the same fabric, and she was talking about the comfort level. So I think that fabric is a starting place for me. It's how I began my brand, and it, you know, all the way, you know, up until now, it's a starting point. What we've evolved to is creating our own prints. You saw Yvonne in this fabulous black and white op art dress. That's based on a Bridget Riley painting, a great female artist that I love, but that is something that, we designed from scratch. And several other. You saw the Miro collection, based on the great, artist Miro. Those are designs that we are inspired by Miro. So we're working a lot with prints, but basically we have fabric in front of us. I have a lot of shapes that are, we call them, staples in our collection. So we'll plug that fabric into an existing shape, and then we always try to come up with some new shapes every season. I think that that's something, people want newness, they just do. They don't, for my first 5 years, I was making the same shape, just putting different fabrics in it, and a lot of the people were saying, they want me to evolve. And so, but it's a very straightforward process. I have a designer that I have an assistant designer. She's been by my side for quite a while. She understands my vision. We sit together, and we do an inspiration board. And whether it's an artist or it's can be like a Saarinen chair we're sitting on. It could be inspiration can come from all over. I can do like the Crystal Bridges collection next because it's the most inspiring. It's the most inspiring architecture. I know Moshe Safdie's work, and I'm just incredibly inspired by this environment. So that happens all the time, and so it's a wonderfully creative process. And then the best part is seeing the finished product. Yeah. So.
Well, that's a lovely note to end on. Let's thank Lisa and Yvonne for their participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. And I think you're going to personalize perhaps some of the bags if you have some time. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
Drive
thank you
safely
for coming.
home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay, we did it.